to go into something that he came upon, which has set the scientific world of white geneticists into a fit. Dr. Robinson, like you were talking about the DNA series.
Yes. A few years ago, my brother and I read a book called The Mark of Oppression. And these two publishers, Cardiner and Oversea, said that they could not understand how is it that a group of people, African Americans, have been bludgeoned over their heads mentally and spiritually for hundreds of years and are still surviving. They couldn't understand it. And they said so in their book. The answer came out in 1996, why it is that not only have African Americans survived the worst mental and spiritual bludgeoning of any people in recorded history, but they are becoming champions of everything in which there is a level playing field. No matter what it is, we predominate in every field. This is why they won't teach our children African history, because they know that once our children get on the same level playing field as their white counterparts, that they will dominate just like we dominate in basketball, baseball, football, track and field, and anything else in which there is a level playing field. So that while they teach their children about the greatness of their European ancestors, they won't teach our children about the greatness of their African ancestors, because then that would be a level playing field in academia. And they know that we will predominate, just like all of these examples we've given them, that our children predominate when they know who they are from the African historical point of view. Now, here's what I found out in 1996. A group of geneticists wrote this book. Little tiny pen. Geneticists.
Can you identify where they're from and the group, how it came about?
Yeah, okay. All right, sure. Yes, indeed. An organization is called the American Association for the Advancement of Science. The American Association for the Advancement of Science. Now, this organization is composed of people who study about DNA and the genome. And you've been reading about the DNA and the genomes. Well, this group of scientists came upon an idea by accident at first, that different groups of people had different numbers of DNA series.
Explain that.
Now, a DNA series means that when your DNA is located, and say they get a hair from your head and they subject it to certain tests, they say, well, this is the DNA of Minister Brown, and yours is different from everybody else in the world, all right? Then they found further that not only are their DNA series different, but the number of DNAs in there are different in different groups. Whites have a different number of DNA, and blacks have a different number of DNA series. Apes have a different number of DNA series. Then they found this amazing thing, that the greater the number of DNA series, the smarter the person, the group is, the greater the probability of genius within that group. So they tested the orangutans, these 15 geneticists from around the world. Now, these geneticists came from 9 different universities. And we have here on the cover of the pamphlet they put out the names of these geneticists. And you can see them right there, right beneath the title of this pamphlet. Now, this pamphlet, most people have no idea what it means. But breaking it down, and after you study it, and have it explained to you by a geneticist, a trained geneticist, you will find that they're talking about DNA series. Now, here are the names of these 15 geneticists from around the world: University of Japan, University of China. Yale University is the headquarters of this organization called the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And you see it down there. Now, this was copyrighted in 1996. All right. What it said is this, and this is the mind-blowing part. It said that when they tested the orangutan, they found out he only had 3 DNA series. When they tested the gorilla, they found that the gorilla has 4 DNA series because he's a little smarter than the orangutan. They tested the chimpanzee, which is an ape, and found that he had 5 DNA series. Then they went all into the different races of the world. They went into Europe and tested the DNA series of the English, the French, the German, the Spanish, the Russians, and found they had 6 DNA series. Then they put all of this, what they found from around the world, on a map. And this map really is called the intelligence map of the world, because they tested 116 different human groups and found their DNA series numbers. All of them, all over the world, have 6. And they put the numbers in form of a little flag that you can see on this map. These little flags have a color. And they show, oh, this is upside down. I'm sorry. Yeah. And they showed that the English have only 6, and all into Europe, only 6. Went over into Japan and China, and they only have 6. Over into America, which is predominantly European, and they only have 6. Then they came to Africa, and they came to the part of Africa. Now, all the rest of them, they put in little flag colors. Those flag colors are orange, red, if you notice. But when they came to Africa, found out that the African people have 9 DNA series, from here just below the Shanghai Empire down to the foot of Africa. All those 10 nations, of which African Americans descended from one of them. We have 9 DNA series, the greatest possibility of genius in our group. Now it's answered this age-old question. How can a people survive being told they're nothing for 400 years, never allowed to learn that they came from beautiful cities, and told they came from a jungle? How could a people survive? How can a people become champions in everything they touch? Because they have 9 DNA series, while the rest of the world has only 6. This is why they copyrighted this. And you'll notice on the outside of this, now this map is taken, I took this map right from this page here, and I blew it up so that the world could see it. Even though this is copyrighted, I can't let you have this book because it's copyrighted.
Can you give us the title of the book?
The title of the book is called Global Patterns of Linkage, Disequilibrium at the CD4 Locus and Modern Human Origins. global patterns of linkage, disequilibrium at the CD4 locus and modern human origin. Now, you have to be a geneticist to even know what what they're talking about. But when we broke it down and interviewed Dr. Kidd, the head, he's the chairman at Yale University, we broke it down into plain, everyday English so that the world would know that the African American is descended from those people who gave to the world the Great Pyramid, gave to the world science, gave to the world mathematics. A black man named Ahmose gave algebra to the world 3,700 years ago. It's in the world books, it's in the encyclopedias. They don't want our children to know this, because then that would make the playing field level for white children. And you know what happens when they made the playing field level in basketball and allowed black men to play. Out of 29 of the top-seeded players in the world today, 28 are African American. When they opened up the Penn relays, when they opened up the Olympics and allowed blacks to run back in 1932, we've won all the gold medals. And the same thing will happen in the classroom when they allow our children to learn their African history. That's what this is saying.
Dr. Robinson, are you saying that the African American also has 9 strands of DNA?
I am saying that we are descended from the West Africans who have 9 DNA series. On this map that these geneticists, you see the green down here?
Yes.
Well, that's where we're from. That's where African Americans are from.
Did they test African Americans also?
They couldn't, they tested Americans as a group, whites. And they have 6. They didn't test African Americans because they know that we are the same people from West Africa.
Oh, so they didn't have to?
Didn't have to.
Okay, that's true.
That's true.
How is it that you think that this evolved, that we evolved with 9 strands
9.
below the Sahara?
Well, it tells you in here. This book tells why. Preemie babies, when they leave in the mother's womb too early, never develop to the same height that a baby that runs a full term. Right?
Yes.
White folks in the China, all mankind arose in Africa. All mankind arose in this part of Africa, right here. It's called the womb of Africa. That's the womb of Africa over here. Right there.
Between the Middle East and...
No. Kenya.
Uganda.
Yeah, that area. All mankind arose there. The great-granddaddies of white folks, great-granddaddies of Chinese, great-granddaddies of Japanese, our great-granddaddies, all of us look the same. All look like apes. That was called Australopithecus. I don't know how technically you want me to get. Australopithecus was the granddaddy, great-great-granddaddy of all races. Now, they left the womb 800,000 years ago. Whites left the womb and wandered up into Europe, and the Chinese wandered over into Asia. And they left the womb before they were fully developed. That's why they did not develop melanin like we did. Those of us who stayed developed full term. They never developed the melanin stimulating hormone. This is why we're the only race on the planet that does not have headlights in our hair.
Headlights.
Headlights. They're little bugs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cooties, right.
Cooties. We're the only race on the planet because we developed full term. We lost our straight hair, that animal hair, over 150,000 years ago. You see, all other races have headlights because they never developed fully. Melanin is this magical chemical that is developed on the 5th layer of the epidermis of your skin. Now, we've been brainwashed to believe that the less melanin you have, the prettier you are, because that's the brainwash. Yes. That's like saying a naked person is prettier than a person with beautiful clothes on. If you get what I'm trying to say, the scenario, yeah. Melanin heals. When you cut yourself, the melanin rushes to the surface of your skin and forms a scab. What color is that scab? I don't care what color. Brown, dark brown. Right. That's the melanin coming up to heal you. This is why we do not get skin cancer, because of the melanin prevents it. The only place where we can get skin cancer, we learned it in the inquiry today, is on the palm of the hand and the fingers. And I can't believe we'd be putting our hand up to the sun to get skin cancer.
Can you talk a little bit more about this hair and the light? What are you saying about African hair?
Oh, what am I saying? Oh, that's a good question.
Because,
okay.
You know, we spend a lot of time straightening it and frying it and cooking it.
And the question is why? The reason why is because we've been programmed to believe that our hair is ugly. And as a result, no, the ruby comb.
Oh, the ruby comb.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here it is. And the reason why is on the plantation, our mothers and fathers were programmed to believe that we were ugly. The white man said, look, you're ugly. So we thought that everything he had was good. So that's why they called our hair bad. So whenever you are raised up to believe that what you got is bad, you're going to have an inferiority complex, and you're not going to perform on high a level as God gave you the gift to perform. Well, white folks have this big problem of headlights. That's the bugs. And all animals do. The ape has to groom himself all day long, picking the bugs out of their hair. Why? Because he has straight hair. Straight hair is animal hair. And therefore, our women spend $15 billion a year to have hair that has headlights. But fortunately, it goes down to the roots. Your straight hair has to come from the root, because the straight hair comes through a round follicle, not an elliptical follicle like human hair, like our hair does. So we've been programmed to believe that. Now, what I have here, right here, is a picture of a robicomb. Now, what is a robicomb? Well, a few years ago, they found that the pesticides that they were using on straight hair to kill the headlights was losing its effectiveness. If you go into a drugstore, I don't know if you all have Rite Aid in New York. Well, you go into Rite Aid and you say, where's the counter for the headlights? They'll point you over to a counter where they have all kinds of pesticide listed. And they have 19 types of chemicals. But these chemicals are losing their effectiveness. They're losing their power. So the scientists went to the laboratory and came up with an electronic comb called a robicomb. And here's a picture of it right here. Now, the robicomb kills the headlights electronically, and you hear it goes zap, zap, zap. You can hear it when it kills a louse. That's one louse. And it kills another louse and combs it out of the head, and also kills the nits. Now, we have a word in the English language called nitpicking. That means picking the nits out of here. Now, what are nits? Nits are little white capsules that can hold the eggs of the lice.
Right.
So nitpicking is taking charge of little tiny things. And that's a little tiny thing that they get out their heads. Nitpicking. So when I made that cassette tape, said we are the supreme remnant of the most advanced people on the planet, I was saying that knowing that we came with 9 DNA series. So we start off better.
Can I ask you one question?
Oh, you asked me a gang of questions.
When did the 9 strands evolve?
Well, all right, let's go back.
All right.
Let's go back. That's a good question. Yeah. Okay. 2 million years ago, Australopithecus, that's all was on Earth, the great-great-granddaddy of all human beings. And he was about 3 DNA series. And then as the millions of years went on, that he evolved into what is known as Homo erectus. Now, he had about 3.5 DNA series. They're about the level of the orangutan. If you look at the orangutan today, you could see what our ancestors looked like 2.5 million years ago, because he has the same golden hair as Europeans' hair right today. The orangutan. You've heard of the orangutan over there in India? Huh? Now, maybe this is a little too rough for your audience, and you're going to get bombarded out of your place in the station, because white folks don't like to hear this at all. I'm sorry. You can edit that.
They've already done the research, correct?
This was done by white folks.
This was done by white folks.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, we didn't do it.
Sure didn't.
We didn't do
wanted
it.
to determine
And
the
here's the names of the people. I don't know how. Now I made you a copy.
Oh, wonderful.
A copy of the.
Believe me, I'm going to take
Of
it
the
and
head.
put it right up.
Yeah. Here's a copy of the front piece with all, and a copy of the back page with all the references where you can find it.
Oh, that is excellent.
So maybe you can take that with you.
Yes.
Yeah, because the inside is what was copyrighted.
Dr. Robertson,
Yeah.
why do you think the research was done? Was it to determine the intellectual difference?
They
between
thought
African-
it was going to come out differently.
Oh,
That's why they copyrighted it. You ain't heard nothing about it, have
no.
you?
That's why you have it.
That's why you have it.
So they didn't publish this.
No, they ain't gonna publish it.
Oh, so they copyrighted it to keep it from being
Now you got it.
That's exactly
published.
Now you got it. Well, of course.
Okay.
You see, they went at it. I was paid $9,000 a couple years ago to write up what is known as a tricontinental racial evolution. In other words, what was happening only on cultural stuff? What was happening 50,000 years ago in Europe? What was happening 40,000 years ago in Europe? 30,000. What was happening 50,000 years ago in Africa? What was happening 40,000 years, 30,000, 20,000, 10,000? A timeline, it's called.
Correct.
Now, this national corporation thought, when they gave me the assignment, they thought that it would prove that the Europeans were so far ahead of Africans that would be no argument. They didn't know that when I got and handed them the findings with 37 books, 28 written by whites, just the opposite. That 44,000 years ago, we had civilizations.
44,000.
44,000.
And beyond.
Iron and steel manufacturing, cities and universities, 44,000 years ago. Well, the Europeans' first book was written 2,800 years ago, 42,000 years later. And that book was by a man named Homer.
And he didn't write it.
It's a poem. It's a poem.
Oh.
He couldn't have written it because Greeks had no alphabet. 28,000.
No, 2,800. Yeah,
They had no alphabet.
well,
They had no alphabet until
they did.
Kemetic people
No,
adopted.
they Homer wrote the book. Now, there's no question
All
about
right,
that.
I ain't
So,
going on that.
yeah.
I can't get information from you.
And but the first book written in Europe was only 2,800 years ago. We had universities 44,000 years ago. I mean,
It's a moot point to argue.
yeah.
Give it to him.
Now, okay, then
You were talking about the evolutionary process.
yeah. So
You were
2.5. Oh yeah. So as the hundreds of thousands of years went by, we acquired. I mean, all mankind acquired more and more. But those who left Africa 800,000 years ago did not get past 6 DNA series. They had left the womb. The womb is Africa. That's where you develop. Just like in the mother's womb. The baby can't develop to his full potential outside the womb. That's why preemies have such a hard, those babies born prematurely, they're called preemies.
Yeah, Professor Robinson. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Robinson.
Oh,
One of the things that was noted, especially in the northern United States, was that most black or African young women who are bearing children are told that they have to have cesarean sections, which are C-sections. And these children are usually taken from the womb prior to its natural
revolution. Mm-hmm.
revolution,
Mm-hmm.
9 months.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Do you think that there may be some correlation between that developmental process with respect to the DNA, the 9 DNA, or maybe there's some secret study being conducted?
I
Research?
really don't know. This is, one thing I've learned is that,
Intellectual guess.
when you make an intellectual
Yes.
guess, knowing how we have always been used as experimental subjects, I would guess that these black women were subjected to this C-section in order to improve how they did this for white women. That's how I believe. That's what I believe. I would believe that until somebody shows me differently. But we've always been used for experimental purposes. One more thing I want to make sure that I get this in. I have here in my hand a book. It's the oldest complete book written by man in the world, in history. This is a copy of that book. This is what we teach our children. That this book, which is not the oldest book that's ever been written by Africans, but it's the oldest complete book found. And this book is written 2,300 BC, before Christ. That's like 4,400 years ago, 4,400 years ago. This is a copy of the book. It's written by a man whose name was Ptah-hotep. And these are called the teachings of Ptah-hotep, written 4,400 years ago. And they found a very interesting introduction by those men who got the copy as soon as it was translated from ancient Kemetic language into English. One of the names of the man, his name is Asa G. Hilliard from the State University of Georgia, and Harriet Williams. These are historians who go into this. But I just want to show you how it feels to be reading a book written by a man 110 years old, who was 110 years old 4,400 years ago. So this is what we teach our children.
What's the geographical origin of this book?
Egypt, ancient Egypt. We call it Kemet.
That's the real name.
That's the real name. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Robinson, before you go, I would like for you to give us your impression or your insight as to what these 9 DNA strands mean spiritually. Because I have a feeling that it has a relationship to a spiritual dimension that we are not aware of.
Yes, sir. I agree. And I thought you were looking at
Oh, no, I
something.
thought you said it was about horn blowing.
No. After you reach a certain level of intelligence, it's more than just knowing how to figure, how to mathematically calculate the distance from here to a star. For instance, most of you have heard of the metric system, where New York is a certain number of kilometers from Philadelphia, and you see on road signs how many kilometers it is to the next town, and how many miles it is to the next town, and so on. Well, the metric system is based on a meter. A meter is a certain length called, the meter is 39.37 inches. Now, where did that come from? Well, it came from the pyramid, because inside of the pyramid was a granite slab that was found by a Frenchman whose name was Abbé Morio. And on the back of this granite slab was the inscription in hieroglyphics saying that this represented 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the equator to the North Pole, calculated by our fathers and mothers 5,200 years ago, and was put on a slab and put into the pyramid, which is only 4,600 years old. So it was kept 600 years and put inside of the pyramid. From that, Abbé Morio, who found it, created the metric system, because that's a fixed distance, the distance from the North Pole to the equator, calculated by black people 5,200 years ago. So I say to my teachers and the heads of the departments in Philadelphia, heads of the school system, why don't you teach this to African children, African American children, that their fathers invented the metric system? Why? And they hang their heads. And the reason they hang their heads, because they didn't know. They didn't know where it came from. 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator. They didn't know that calculus, geometry, and trigonometry came from 3 black women. I always say black women are the smartest people in the world.
They are.
They didn't know that algebra came from a black man 3,700 years ago named Amos. And it's in the World Book. They put it there. Right? But why don't you teach our children that? Because that would make them on a level playing field, and they would outdo your folk, your children, every time.
Right.
Every time.
So you're saying the reason our children, and I want you to go back to that spiritual question, but you may incorporate that in this answer, that our children are diminished because of lack of knowledge of themselves. And without knowledge of yourself, there's something in you that you can't
But it's worse than that. It's worse than that. It's exactly right what you're saying. But it's even worse than that. Because it's all right not to know, but to know wrongfully that you are less than human. You see, it isn't that we weren't taught something. We were taught negative things about ourselves. It's not knowing. It's knowing the wrong thing about yourself. And being taught the wrong thing. But that's still not all. The white folks were taught the wrong things about us too, and their hatred and their contempt also has an effect on us. Because to be hated by the dominant group is just like a child in school being hated by the teacher. The dominant person in that room diminishes his intelligence, diminishes his ability to create, diminishes his ability to solve mathematical problems. You see, to be hated has a physiological impact on you. To being despised. Now, W.B. Du Bois said it affects everybody except the talented 10th. Now, the talented 10th, and we don't believe it's 10%. We think it's about 2%. My Professor Robinson has calculated it's about 2% of us are rise above the hatred, rise above being hated, you know, and we can calculate this. This is where our geniuses come from that little tiny 2%. But suppose we were 90%, look, we would have solved the problem of cancer by now, solved the problem of AIDS. If our being were allowed to flourish. Now I'm going to get back to what you're saying about the spiritual aspect. We calculate, Professor Robinson and Brother Battle, have you ever seen our book called The Journey to Shanghai People?
No, but I want to see it before I leave. I want to get a copy.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have them. Professor Battle and my brother Calvin wrote the book. I added to it. And they have calculated, he and Professor Battle have calculated that once you get above 7 DNA series, then you enter the spiritual realm. And this spiritual realm allows you to experience things that people on a lower level of intelligence can't experience. Like we can experience something like people with only 6 DNA series, like a European, they can experience things that the ape can't experience. Well, just like they're only 1 above a chimpanzee, we're 3 above him.
And the difference between a chimpanzee and man is astronomical.
Well,
And
actually,
he's only 1.
That's only 1. He's only 1. See, I wouldn't even be bragging. This is why why do you think, look down at the bottom here. What does it say?
It's upside down.
Yeah. What does it say down at the bottom? Copyright.
Yes. Yes. 1996.
That's right.
By American, I can't quite make that out, but you
Associations for Advancement of Science.
Yes.
There it is. Well, I'm going to give you a copy of this page. I can't give you the book because it's copyrighted. And Dr. Kidd sent me the book. He's the head. He's the head of this organization.
Does it have a Library of Congress number?
Man, I don't think they would put that down there in the Library of Congress.
Because we're doing this opposite of what they want.
Right.
I don't believe they would. I don't believe they would. Let me see. I don't see it.
But I don't want you to get off that spiritual.
Yeah, now here's what happened. No. Mm-mm.
They just put that as copyright.
That's all. Yep.
Can you get another one? Stop. Professor, could you please continue to elaborate on the spiritual? Dr. Robinson.
And I think that once, and Professor Robinson, Calvin, Professor Calvin Robinson and Brother Battle have examined this possibility that Ma'at, which is the spiritual foundation of our mothers and fathers, reaching back over 10,000 years. This is our way of life. Some people call it, that was our religion. Well, you see, religion is not the proper term, because this set of laws governed our mothers and fathers in ancient Kemet and in Shanghai to become not only great scientists, but also were unbeaten, unconquered for thousands of years. We were the leaders of the world in science and humaneness and letters and all types of things. No other group can ever build the pyramid. Japan tried it in 1974, but their spiritual development wasn't high enough to do it. Because after a certain level of intelligence in calculus, when you get above that and into the theory of numbers and into the area, what you were saying about this professor nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, it gets beyond man's engineering, gets beyond man's mathematics as he knows it today. And our fathers and mothers were beyond that. And this one, our pyramid, the Great Pyramid, is 47 stories high. Japan got up to 19 stories and it fell down. America got up to 20 stories and it fell down. Because the weight of those 2.5 ton blocks of stone, if they're not calculated with certain precision, it'll crush everything beneath it. Each one weighs 2.5 tons. Each one. And how many are there in the Great Pyramid?
I think
1,200,000.
Whoa.
Each one weighing over 2.5 tons.
It's amazing.
Yes. Perhaps you can, because many people just look at the pyramids and they see a triangle, and you think that
In
all
our
you
book.
got to do is cut the stones triangly and stack them on top of each other. But perhaps you can tell us what the pyramids incorporate and what scientific...
It's an astronomical laboratory. It lets the light in from certain stars, making certain calculations. This is how our fathers and mothers could calculate. We had the mathematics to calculate the distance from the North Pole to the equator. 600 years before the pyramid was built. That was the math leading up to it. You see what I'm saying? Now, you don't get that spiritual knowledge, with 6 DNA series. You can't do it with 6. So when, as a father up the road, you get toward 9, then you enter the spiritual realm. And